Good morning, everyone. We do hope that you are enjoying the conference thus far. This morning, we are about to engage a wonderful panel regarding education. And the title of our discussion for today is Learning Loss Amid COVID-19. But I want to start first with a quote from James Baldwin. And James Baldwin stated that not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. And this is an opportunity now for us to really face what is occurring with children in high poverty, high minority communities, and look at how COVID-19 has really exacerbated the issues that are occurring in our local communities, and how we as community leaders, educators, and folks in our local leadership and our home communities should work together now more than ever so that our kids get the very best of what we have to offer them. And the purpose of our workshop today is to look at what the understanding of COVID-19 really is, how it impacts diverse student populations, and what educators and community leaders can do together to mitigate the ongoing impact of learning loss as a result of what is occurring. As I stated earlier, we have an awesome, panel of folk who are going to talk about this today. And as I call their names, I want them to wave their hands on the screen, and we're going to move forward. Dr. Nadine Arrington. Wave your hand, Doctor. There you are, Dr. Arrington. Dr. Arrington is a native of Bay Springs, Mississippi, and she began her career in 1993 as a middle school language arts teacher in East Jasper School District in Heidelberg, Mississippi. And now, as of July 2016, Dr. Heidelberg is the superintendent of that school district. And one thing that she doesn't say about her own district, but because I do look at school data for NAACP, Dr. Arrington's district is one of three predominantly Black high poverty districts with all schools rated C or higher. There are only three districts in Mississippi that are 99% plus where students are high minority, high poverty students, and all schools in her district are rated C or higher. That is truly an accomplishment. And Dr. Arrington, we appreciate the leadership that you provide in the East Jasper community, and they're certainly blessed to have you. Our next panelist is Dr. Kalanya Moore. Dr. Moore, wave your hand, let us see you. Dr. Moore. Dr. Moore serves as the Assistant Professor and Director of Field Experiences and Clinical Practices and School District Partnership Liaison for the Teacher Education Council Department, Governing Board, and the Teacher Education Department at Mississippi Valley State University. Let me say, Mississippi Valley State University. That is my alma mater. So I'm so glad to have Dr. Moore with us. Dr. Moore is uniquely positioned in her work in LeFlore County because she also serves as a school board member for the Greenwood LeFlore Consolidated School District. And that district is actually in its second year now as a consolidated school district. So her first year might have been a little turbulent in that they had to go virtual all of a sudden, just midway through the year, so to speak. And I like her spiritual mantra, and it derives, she has two of them that actually derive from Galatians 6:9. Let us not be weary in well doing, for in due season we shall reap if we faint not. And 2 Corinthians 5:7, for we walk by faith and not by sight. Also with us on the panel is Ben Irwin. Let us see you, Ben. Hi, Ben. Glad to have you with us. Ben is a policy researcher at the Education Commission of the States. And prior to joining the commission, Ben taught high school social studies in Kentucky and worked in education policy at One Voice right here in Jackson. And he also worked with the National Conference of State Legislatures. And finally, our final panelist is Reverend Jeffrey Stafford. Hello, Reverend Stafford. Glad to have you with us. Reverend Stafford is pastor of Pleasant Green Baptist Church in Vicksburg, and he serves as the P16 Community Council Chair for the Jackson Public School District. And the one thing he did not mention in his bio is that Reverend Stafford is also a former trainer of teachers in science. And so we appreciate all of the diversity that he brings and his experiences to this conversation, not just as a community leader, but also as a leader among teachers in the K-12 field. And so we want to kick this conversation off first with framing what learning loss is and looking some of the policy issues around this and what the data may be telling us. And Ben Irwin is going to kick this off for us. And so Ben, you take the screen from here and lead us into this part of the conversation.
Perfect. Good morning, everyone. Really grateful to be here today to really participate in this really important conversation. And yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to share a little bit of our work and our research. So before we get started, here's a quick look at what we'll cover. I plan to provide a brief overview of what learning loss is and what we already know, as well as the ways in which it's been impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. So for starters, what is learning loss? Learning loss is typically discussed in the context of a summer break, as some studies indicate that learning generally stops when schools are closed, with students losing an average of a month's worth of school each summer. With pretty wide variation across student groups, learning loss may also vary across subjects and grades, but it's most pronounced in math. So who does learning loss impact most? Research indicates that younger students, students from low-income households, students with disabilities, and potentially English learners are most likely to be impacted by learning loss. These studies show that younger students experience less summer learning loss proportionally, but their steeper growth trajectories in the early years and the cumulative impact of learning loss show the importance of interventions in these early grades. Although some studies dispute these findings, low-income students have also been found to experience greater losses. Some researchers have attributed this to what's called the faucet theory, which identifies the slowing or the stopping of the, quote, resource faucet, which is accessible during the school year to low-income students, while higher-income students typically have access to the financial and human capital needed to even make learning gains during the summers. Now we want to take a closer look at pandemic learning loss. NWEA released national learning loss projections that account for school closures caused by the pandemic, and they were really focused on this period from March, when schools started to close down, through the end of the school year and into the summer, not necessarily accounting for the fall. NWEA projected that students return to school this fall with 50% less learning gains and potentially an entire school year behind what would typically be expected. This graphic really highlights the extent of learning loss. You can see in the middle between March and April, when school closures started to happen, you see the normal trajectory of learning, and you see where it kind of cuts off right there. This is specific to math. In the cases where there would be a learning slide represented by those dotted lines, you can see quite a big difference between learning loss caused by COVID-19 and what would be expected in a typical summer. I also think it's really important to note that this research doesn't account for variations in achievement that already existed within each grade level, and that really speaks to the fact that this COVID-19 pandemic and learning loss caused by it could exacerbate achievement and opportunity gaps that were already in place. I'll also note that this chart specific to math, but we see really similar trends in English as well. Using the same NWEA data, some researchers actually ran learning loss simulations in 19 states. They looked at assessment data in addition to school level demographic and performance information. The researchers found a wide range of learning loss from state to state. Just to highlight a couple examples here, Arkansas students are projected to lose roughly 1/3 of a year in reading and almost 2/3 of a year in math. While in Louisiana, students are expected to lose an average of over half a year in reading and almost over a full year in math. Students in some states, based on these projections, were actually projected to make gains. And we're gonna talk a little bit about why there's such a wide range in learning loss, especially during this COVID-19 pandemic. One thing that makes projecting learning loss difficult, especially in this context, is the drastically different lived experiences of students during. As I said, simulations found that some students made gains, and we want to look at a few key factors that can kind of speak to why some students may have made gains while others lost even more than what would be expected in a typical summer. So first, student experiences varied quite a bit in terms of stress or trauma during the pandemic, and we know this is a significant obstacle to student learning, especially as we shifted to remote learning. We also know that surveys have found that more affluent districts were more likely to require synchronous learning with an educator, in addition to formally tracking student attendance and engagement during remote learning. Additionally, a nationally representative sample of survey of educators also found that students in high poverty schools and schools predominantly serving were more likely to be reviewing previous content instead of covering new content. And finally, and potentially most significantly, student access to technology and broadband really varies widely, which we're going to look at a little bit closer because this has become such an important part of this new reality of remote learning that we're living with. So disparities in internet and device access really play out on racial and economic lines. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, roughly 75% of white and Asian households reported that their children always had access to the internet, while roughly 65% of Black and Latinx households reported the same. We see a similar trend along access to connected devices like a laptop or a tablet. In addition to these racial disparities, we also see that almost 90% of households earning at least $150,000 a year said their children always had access to devices, while just over 50% of households making less than $35,000 a year said the same, with very similar data for internet access as well. So we're really seeing a combination of less access to synchronized learning, less access to new content and the technology needed to engage in online learning, as well as just the different lived experiences for students day to day. And this really points towards widening already existing opportunity gaps that we saw prior to the pandemic. So a lot of what I've talked about so far is really focused on these projections because a student assessment data is limited as a result of the pandemic, but we can get some insight into how these disparities are manifesting themselves in the current school year. So this chart shows real-time math data, or real-time data for online math curriculum participation and progress. This is out of Harvard and Brown's Economic Opportunity Tracker. And this data shows that low-income students are engaging with and progressing with this math curriculum at lower rates than their higher income peers. And these trends have really persisted since school closures began. And this chart here represents what we're seeing in Mississippi as well. We actually see that low-income students are progressing at a rate twice as low as the state average, and even with an even greater gap between low-income and high-income peers. And I really want to make the point that these disparities in participation and progress are really driven by those factors that we just discussed around synchronous learning, around access to technology and broadband, and around student experiences with trauma and stress throughout the pandemic. So overall, what we know about summer learning loss, inequitable access to the necessary resources, and these projections in real-time data, they're showing pretty large racial and economic disparities in pandemic learning loss. So I hope this provided a good foundation for our panelists to build off of, and I just want to thank you all for bearing with me as we went through quite a bit of data in a short amount of time. So with that being said, I'll pass it off to Dr. Watkins and the rest of the panel.
Thank you, Ben. I appreciate you taking the time to lay that out for us, because I think we really need to understand the issue that is before us, and I believe your data helped us frame that. I also, if I recall correctly, you indicated that NWA, which is that assessment group, and NWA does have some schools that they work with in Mississippi, even though your research didn't include Mississippi, or their research this time didn't include Mississippi. But I recall you saying how during this pandemic, kids could lose a year to a half a year to a year in mathematics, half a year to a year in reading. But as we were preparing, I want the audience to know this, that as we were preparing for this conversation today, another group called Curriculum Associates that has I believe the iReady program, they found that students return to school 2 or more grade levels behind in high minority communities versus those that return to school in lower minority communities. And so we really have to pay attention to what the data are saying to us, because different views show us the issue through different lenses, and we have to make sure that we are aware of what the data says. But now, I want us to take a look at what we're seeing actually in local communities. Now, Dr. Arrington, I'd like for you to kick us off here, being the superintendent where you are. Talk to us a little bit more about how the learning loss has showed up in your district and how you're approaching that.
Okay, good morning, everyone, again. Even when we're talking about, communities of color, children of color, I think, color and class are still inextricably connected, even in school populations like mine that have a high majority of minority students. And in my case, I call them the more kids. All right. So if there's more parental education, okay, if there's more income, even within that diverse group, there tends to be, more engagement, more accountability and responsibility, when it comes to their children's learning. So that is even within, right, that bubble that I have that is 99.9% high poverty, high minority students. But for the rest of those kids existing in that bubble, then, you have conditions, of course, that are what that COVID has exacerbated in terms of learning loss. So I'm just going to talk about a few of those. For example, if you look at the summer slide, right, and then you connect that, with COVID. So you actually have two episodes of learning loss that just basically collided. And I mean, that's the way I've seen it in my district. So for example, in the summer, kids have, in my community, my students have that lack of access, to summer enrichment opportunities. We're in a rural setting. At this point in time, my community doesn't even have a grocery store. It closed down maybe like 2 years ago. No industry in the district, in the community. Parents have to at least drive 15, 20, 30 minutes to an hour to go to work. So not having those type of summer enrichment opportunities, whether they be academic or whether they be extracurricular, like in terms of boys and girls clubs, parents just taking them on trips, those types of things. Then also the lack of distractions in their home environment, right, for learning. So for example, students will, and I'll talk a little bit about that more when I get to what has happened with us with remote learning. But having that distraction-free environment, right, that's conducive to learning. Children in high poverty communities often lack that for several reasons. Okay, also assumptions of parental responsibilities. What we've seen, and again across the summer, even if enrichment opportunities are available, students may not even be able to participate in those because they're having to tend to younger siblings, right? Or even in cases of age teenagers, they're actually having to get out and get a job to help support families. So there are a lot of obstacles and challenges that children of color who are high poverty face. And so now let's move to COVID and the learning loss in our district. So when we did return to school, we came back, we returned totally virtual. We had several different reentry plans, but we finally just decided to everyone to come back virtual. And that was, it was very, very difficult for us. So what we had, and I'm just going to read from a few notes here. Of course, schools had been shut down, so kids had no access to anything. We came back. We did, some initial screeners, and so what we found is that, and this is I'm concurring with you, Dr. Watkins. What we saw with our kids is we had children who were a year to 2 years behind, based on initial screener. So you got again summer slide, and then COVID-19 loss that has exacerbated that. Now, and that's just with some of the average kids, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when you talk about students who were already in Tier 3 and receiving intensive interventions prior to school shutting down in August, then the losses are even higher. And I'll give you an example. And this is a personal example. So my granddaughter was receiving Tier 3 interventions, and she is 2 years behind right now. and that's on the STAR. You know, we're using the STAR screener and with iReady. And if you look at iReady, she's even farther behind. If you look at the iReady reports, and so and then also with the virtual learning, some of the things I was mentioning before is once we went to remote learning, then teachers had to compete with whatever was occurring in the household. So that could have been the television. It could have been other siblings on the PA. I mean, we're just being honest here because we're talking about, right, how has COVID-19 exacerbated what we typically see with learning loss, right? And so, kids are now in an unstructured environment at home. You know, you may have parents who are working, it's just siblings at home, right? Or you may have parents who are not working, or you have other relatives, you know, who are living in the house. You know, we have those extended family situations. And so teachers are competing with the television, they're competing with the PS4, they're competing with relatives in the home who are going about their daily lives. And that goes back to what I was talking about with kids of color and high poverty kids who often don't have that distraction-free environment where they can actually concentrate, right, on the task at hand. And so all of those things, in addition to what losses kids return to school with, right, then we have these continuing challenges that we're dealing with on a day-to-day basis. I want to also mention, so I was talking about with the distraction. So it could have been the cooking in the house. It could have been the cleaning in the house. It's also helping tend to toddlers in the house, you know, while they're still trying to be on their Zoom meetings with their teachers. And we did adopt, you know, the synchronous learning. So teachers were actually teaching on Zoom every day. And then when we moved to hybrid, then we were placing assignments in Google Classroom. The kids were actually getting face-to-face instruction on their scheduled days, and that was K through 12. Now, I want to add this last point that I don't want us to. I just wanted to everyone to be aware of. And actually, I had to do this on yesterday, and this is something that breaks my heart to do. But I had to actually file reports with Child Protective Services, because here's another thing that has happened with COVID-19. In families or students who were prone to excessive absentees, right, to absenteeism, then COVID-19, it seems, has just opened up a whole nother, what do we want to call it? Just a whole nother ball of wax, right? In terms of kids not getting instruction, right? Which is still what? Increasing learning loss. So we have kids who parents, they're just not coming to school. They were not coming on virtual. We switched and moved to hybrid. They were not coming on hybrid. And so we have some kids we have not seen at all. So we have had to file, actually, in terms of the school attendance officer, I have filed over around 120 referrals to truancy. Okay. But on yesterday, I actually filed around 15 referrals to Child Protective Services for parents we cannot contact, students who have not shown up at all.
Wow. And that's just an example of what one district is experiencing. And as I've heard across the state, so many more of our districts are experiencing so much of the same, Dr. Arrington. I certainly applaud your efforts for taking the helm in such a way that you want your kids to be in school. It's unfortunate that our parents take us to the point where we have to engage other measures like that to get their attention.
And Dr. Watkins, let me throw this in. I know I'm probably over my time, but that is also in addition to innumerable phone calls that we're tracking through school status and text messages and home visits. We have probably conducted over 100 home visits, and some of those are repeat visits.
Now, Dr. Moore, I'd like for you to give us your perspective on this learning loss issue through the lens of working with student teachers, those that you have in school districts, what they're experiencing, and how you all are approaching this.
It's funny that you asked the question. I posed that question about 2 or 3 weeks ago to our student teachers. We actually had a face-to-face. Right now we are doing Zoom. We are, amid Zoom platform as well in our everyday classrooms. But one particular week, I did assign a day where our student teachers could meet with us face to face. And I posed the question. I said, "What are you experiencing?" And one of the students noted that I was seen as like a first responder to students amid learning loss. And one of the student teachers, mentor teacher, is what we call a seasoned teacher, and she has struggled. And so the student teacher has had to basically totally do a total takeover of that particular platform or those various platforms within this semester. And so there has been times where communication between the mentor teacher and the student teacher has been limited due to the mentor teacher not having that technological skill set that they need in order to assist and support our student teachers and the students. So I got a call from a principal yesterday that stated, "Dr. Moore, I hope you don't mind. And mind you, our student teachers are not to act as anything other than a student teacher. They're not supposed to be teacher assistants or any other area of support around the school, only to be under the lens and the support and the wing, if you will, of those mentor teachers." And so she said, "I'm very impressed with this particular student teacher. She's very technologically savvy, and I want to move her in a classroom to help support one of my seasoned teachers." She says, "I hope you don't mind." I said, "Well, this goes against our policy, but at this time, during this pandemic, we have to be able to support each other." And that's one of the caveats to this, whereas you see is we make shifts in policy, shifts and adjustments in our policy to support our mentors, to support our families, and ultimately to support our students. There have been areas where I've asked students, our teacher candidates, "So what needs do you see our students displaying during this pandemic?" And so they discussed academic rigor has been an issue. Our teachers aren't able to assist them with rigor. They are noticing restlessness among the students. They're noticing not a lot of cognitive activity. So that activity is kind of like you don't see any increases in trend lines in cognitive activity. And I guess I have about 12 student teachers, and all of them are in a chorus of about 4 districts. And I do know one of those districts have been pretty limited to the types of technology they utilize to assist and support our parents and our students. Dr. Arrington noted earlier where our students are really struggling in the home environment. And so I think right now our student teachers are having to adjust their methods of trying to reach our students. I do know that they have had issues with clerical duties. Every day you have that taking of the roll and taking the lunch count, so you don't have that experience. So that particular experience has been a loss. Teaching support to rigor. So those are one of the losses that our teacher candidates have experienced. We also utilize the method of reflection. We're trying to get our students, I guess in the last 5 to 6 years, we have really honed in on allowing our students to be able to truly paint a true blue picture of themselves reflectively as how they see themselves in August versus how they see themselves in December, or vice versa when it comes to the spring semesters. And so they stated that, they were unable to really paint a true picture of what they could have been if it was a regular situation, or a situation where they were in classroom, they're under the wing of their mentor teachers, and they're in the classroom environments with their students, and totally involved in the community, having a sense of community, and then having a sense of support and assistance to parents. So, even as student teachers, they have to provide plans where they assist and support parents, because at some point in time, you never know types of situations that they may have to enter into as a teacher candidate in the role of a student teacher in school districts. You may have we've had a time where a mentor teacher got sick in the classroom. You have to be mentally and professionally prepared and emotionally prepared to take over that classroom, even though you feel you may not be ready. So we ask them to reflect often, several times a week, and they have to do that reflection process in class with their mentor teachers and with their university supervisors, which is a person designated as a liaison between myself and the mentor teacher to assist and support our teacher candidates. Also, they have been unable to truly identify learning difficulties among their students. They say, right now in this type of environment, we're only really attributing these types of activities to our visual learners. We're unable to move into the hands-on types of learning for our kinesthetic learners. It does assist with the support of our auditory learners, but they say, Dr. Moore, it really they even talked about doing home visits, and I say you really don't want to move into that type of uncharted water as a candidate. So technically, we can't dispatch you out into the homes because you are not a certified teacher of the state. You don't hold a teaching certificate for our state. So, these are the types of conversations that we have had, whether on Zoom or face-to-face, as to some of the loss that they have experienced, and even a loss in themselves. One of the students stating that we are actually acting as rescuers amid along with my inadequacy, as a teacher candidate. We feel as if we have to rescue the mentor and the student and the parent not being fully certified for our state. So they have experienced quite a bit this particular year. So I had only one student teacher in the spring when this actually hit, and she was from out of state. So she wrestled with going home or staying on campus. And so I do think one thing I can say about teaching the millennial today is that they are adept. They are very technologically savvy. They teach me. And so I do know that they adapt to change, especially technological changes, quickly and with ease, that I've noticed. But I do know that, but they don't handle stress well, is what I have noticed. They don't handle stress well, and so they can work their technology and different types of technology quickly. They can adapt quickly, and so those are the types of learning losses that I have actually heard or seen our teacher candidates.
That's really helpful, Dr. Moore, because I find interesting that they consider themselves to be rescuers, first responders. But I would encourage you to also tell them to consider themselves as heroes as well. And the term hero is relative, because a hero is an individual who was called to service for a particular time. And when you talked about some of the experienced teachers not understanding the technology or not being able to acclimate quickly to the technology, your student teachers were able to step in and transition very quickly to the use of that technology. But you also identified something that we don't hear a lot of folk talking about, but we know teachers, it's in the back of teachers' mind. But how is the technology allowing us to really address the learning styles of kids? You indicated how it's addressing the auditory learner, it's addressing the visual learner. But if you got someone like a little Earl that's in there that's a tactile kinesthetic, and you keep telling me on the Zoom to sit down, that's because I don't want to sit down. So but that's the same child that was in the class face to face. And what we're also finding is that some of our greatest teachers in the face-to-face environment have ended up being like first-year teachers in the online environment. So
And I had a principal that totally moved her and placed the teacher candidate in the place of the mentor. So I thought that was, she said, Dr. Moore, they are really ready technologically. They are really ready. So I said, okay, I do. And at this point, I do think there's some things that we have to work through. But I think the key here is collaboration. And support. We got to support each other.
I agree. I agree. Reverend Stafford, you bring, I think, a very interesting and very different view and perspective, having been a trainer of teachers, certainly a parent, but now chair of the P16 Council and for Jackson Public Schools. Talk about how all of those different aspects of your being is impacting your leadership as chair of P16 Council, how you're supporting your district, how you all are engaging learning loss and moving this whole conversation forward for Jackson.
Well, I'm glad you started out this conversation with the James Baldwin quote on change. Obviously, there's been a lot of changes that have taken place in our communities in our time together now. From my vantage point, like you said, as a parent, as a partner with JPS, as a person who grew up in Jackson Public Schools and who has been a professional in Jackson Public Schools, there are several changes that we're dealing with right now, even from a policy perspective, as well as from a practitioner level. If you think about Jackson Public Schools, Jackson Public Schools was slated to go back in kind of like Dr. Arrington's school district, a hybrid model, but then they decided because of the case numbers to go back to virtual. That's a major shift, a major change in a quick 2-week time period from getting ready to go back to going back in another way. Then on top of that, you have teachers having new lesson plan formats that the district has adopted, and now to have to use those in a very, very new way. Not using them in a classroom with students there with you, but now using them to create learning management systems on computers. And as I heard someone already say, you have some of your best in-person teachers who are now struggling and striving and stressed out about how do I even get this computer to come on? So there are changes right there. So you have these new learning management systems. Then you also have shifting instructional paradigms, even in the middle of the school term that's happening there. And so you seeing teachers having to shift and make changes with instructional formats, instructional plans, instructional perspectives, all of those, and the other ancillary changes that have taken place. And I'm saying Jackson Public Schools, but I think we have seen this taking place in several districts across Mississippi, and as Ben said, even across the U.S. We've seen device issues in Jackson, in Mississippi, and across the nation. We've seen child nutrition issues. Where students are not, some students are not able to get access to the nutritional needs that they have to promote learning that they've needed. We've seen declining enrollments because of, people are in their emotional states afraid to go back to schools because they know that public gatherings are attributing to the increasing of numbers. And so then you have mixed messages from both federal, state, local, and school-wide leaders. Those changing dynamics and changing perspectives on when we should be in school, when we shouldn't be in school. So from a parent's perspective, that's a lot to take in. From having been a professional in education, having been a community partner with Jackson Public Schools and other school districts, you have to be ready to deal with the elephants that are sometimes in the room. We've talked about some of the economic disparities. We've talked about some of the educational disparities, but there are also political ramifications for learning loss. There are learning loss is happening for a multifaceted set of reasons. From the P16 Council, our role in reviewing and diving into the policies and looking at the data that schools present us with to see where we're going in the learning loss. In our meetings, ultimately, we're left to 4 conclusions. And those 4 conclusions are essentially that there's going to be loss. There's going to be learning loss. There's going to be longevity loss. There's going to be lung capacity loss, or there's going to be life loss. What we have to do is minimize as many of those losses as possible. While
Pastor, would you say that again, please? I'd like to hear all 4 of those again.
From my vantage point as president of the P16 Council, there are going to be losses. And there's essentially 4 of them. All right. Yes, there's learning loss, which we're here to talk about today. There's learning loss. There's longevity loss. When you look at the scientific data that's being presented from the researchers with COVID-19, from the actual, and let me share this, since you mentioned, I did train teachers. My profession was in human anatomy and biology. So I'm always looking at the scientific data and the data that are coming from the immunologists as well as the virologists. And so those persons who are the doctors and the nurses who are actually working with these things. And so there's going to be some longevity loss because of what COVID-19 is actually doing on the inside of the brain and the body. There's going to be some lung capacity loss based on how COVID-19 infects, the respiratory system. But the ultimate end is the possibility of life loss. And so our role in terms of P16 is to support Jackson Public School District in whatever decisions they make to assist them in minimizing any of those losses. We could spend a lot of time talking about the differences in the way the adolescent brain works and their need for socialization, and the children and the 3rd and 4th graders and their need for developing those skills and acquisitional and acquiring skills for language and for learning and all of those things at those early ages so that they won't be left anymore behind. And so the question that I think is real important for us to ask is, how do we prioritize one versus the other of the 4? I'm not just attributing it to learning loss versus life loss, because there's a lot in the middle that could be lost. And how we prioritize that literally is the life and breath of where we are in this time today.
Reverend Stafford, you said quite a bit in just those few minutes, and we could spend a whole nother hour just unpacking what you shared. And I wish we had in another hour, because that was very rich for us as panel members, as well as for those who are listening in the audience. But I'd like to come back to you again and take about 60 seconds, if you will, please, to talk about what do you think parents are learning and community folk are learning? And Dr. Moore, you may have a perspective on this as well. Parents have a front row seat to the classroom now. Parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, daycare folk where children are sitting, they've got a front row seat to the rigor or the lack thereof inside of classrooms now. What do you think we're learning now?
So I'll keep my 60 seconds as short as possible. I think one of the very first and primary things that parents and the community at large is learning, as for that matter, is that the value of a teacher has been far under assessed. That value of that teacher and that school in their local community has been far undervalued for too long. And so we're talking about teacher funding and education funding. And so when we approach it from that level, we ought to see some legislatures making some different decisions based on the decisions they've made before, because there is more valuable in our community from educational, economic, and all kinds of other areas than having those teachers in those spaces and places to help us with educating our children. We, parents have talked about educators and what those teachers have made their children do. Now they're understanding why they've made their children do those things and why they've applied those pressures. And so I think the whole community is taking a brand new look at the exceptional value of our educators.
Wow, thank you. And Dr. Moore, before you respond, I want to share with everyone and remind everyone that Mississippi has done phenomenal work in addressing access to technology in our local school districts. And so many schools at this point are now getting Chromebooks or laptops that they can, or tablets that they can send home with their kids. And districts are also buying or purchasing access to hotspots as well. But I wanted to say that the Greenwood LaFleur Consolidated School District had already stepped out on faith in this process, because it was a 1-to-1 district in the Mississippi Delta for the 1920 school year. So when it actually shifted to the virtual learning, all of your kids had laptops and hotspots already. So talk to us, like, if I want to say 60 seconds again, talk us a little bit about that, and from a board member perspective, what can you share with us?
Well, from a board member's perspective, I think, I have to say we are 20 years into the 21st century. And it's no reason for districts operating in this century not to be ready for this type of, and I don't guess anyone could have been ready for this type of activity that is taking place globally. But in the 21st century, I do think that districts must reevaluate what technology looks like in their district in order to best support teachers, students, and parents. I do know that in 1920, we did step out on faith, and we managed to get over 4,000 Chromebooks and 4,000 hotspots. Is over for 4,000 plus. And so, once coronavirus hit, we were thinking, wow, we are ready, but there were some limitations. So we did have to get training for parents, training for grandparents, training for teachers, training for community members that are assisting, training for daycares. We've even had daycare facilities who are stepping in the parental role of the parent who has to go out and work, who can't work at home. And so what we did know that, in the 21st century, we've got to be proactive. We've got to take the risk. We've got to spend the money. If we receive the money, spend the money to support our students, teachers, and our families and communities technologically. Because if it were not for this millennium, I think our students will be a little bit further behind, because if you look at the millennial, you have young teachers that are going into our schools with 1-year licenses, 3-year licenses, who just come out of online programs that are totally technologically based with those types of platforms. So they were already acclimated to the use of Canvas or Google Classroom, because they've come out of online programs where they've utilized those type of platforms. So I think we've got to begin thinking 21st century. Yes, we can use the 19th century as a landmark or a guidepost, but we've got to begin moving our new teachers, our novice teachers, our students, parents, and the community into the 21st century. We've got to do that, we can't mess around with placing our students at an advantage point where they're already competing or behind globally. We can't look at it local or state or national. We've got to look at where our students are with the use of technology in the 21st century at a global standpoint.
That's awesome, Dr. Moore. And I think that also is a message to our local community leaders in regards to mayors, aldermen, city council members to work with the technology folks who provide broadband capacity in our local communities, because your district has a city limits, and your district is very rural as
Very
well.
rural.
And so depending on where you're located with that hotspot, the capacity of the hotspot could be decreased by how rural that area is and the lack of access to broadband in those areas. And so it's going to take all of us working together, moving together into the 21st century in a more concerted way. And I'd like to pull in Dr. Arrington and Ben at this point about, in terms of solutions from on the ground level perspective, Dr. Arrington, solutions from a policy perspective. Ben, talk to us a little bit about how do you think we can start solving this issue around learning loss and those things that seem to be exacerbating it that we've discussed earlier on this panel. Dr. Arrington? Unmute, Dr. Arrington.
Oh, I apologize. I was saying, you know, Dr. Watkins, that is an extremely tough question. And honestly, we don't have an answer for that. I mean, it's something we're just continually turning over in our heads and in our planning. You know, how do we bridge this gap? And I think at the crux of it, we know that establishing relationships and the collaboration piece is going to be the key, right? It's the how of it that we're still struggling with. And particularly when it comes to reaching, and this may be interesting, but reaching our younger parents, because those have been our biggest challenges. I mean, we even have the grandmoms and the great grandmoms who are willing to try and get in there and fiddle with the computer. But bridging that communication gap with our younger parents has really been a struggle. So at this point, I'm not sure I have the answer for that, except that our continuous efforts in trying to build relationships with various facets in the community. Now, our P16 Council is, I mean, very dedicated. We have a very close relationship with our P16 Council. And they have been very diligent in their efforts, right? And trying to, you know, move out, fan out into the community and bring different organizations, you know, into the fold and under the tent, so to speak. And so, again, I don't have the answer in terms of what's the solution, but the process is continue to try to build those relationships and reach out to those parents that, for whatever reason, we've just not been able to bring to the table.
Ben?
Yeah, I think it is such a difficult question to answer. And from a state policy perspective, a lot of what we're seeing is states trying to empower districts or give districts the flexibility to respond to their own context. So I think first would be getting students online if you're in a virtual or a hybrid learning environment. Also providing training for teachers and that kind of instructional delivery, because it is drastically different than in-person delivery. We've seen states providing funding for high quality curriculum materials, because when you're making that transition, your in-person curriculum materials may be a little different than what it would look like online. I think some states have been pushing districts to think about a 1, a 2, a 3 year, like longer term planning, especially when it comes to assessing students, because obviously at this point, assessment and accountability are kind of on the back burner because districts are responding to the immediate needs of students, but also the need for districts to figure out where students are at both academically and socially, emotionally. And I think, states have been trying to provide that flexibility, but it's also, it's going to look different across those different districts. I know we've seen some states starting to move in the direction of figuring out like what are some mitigation efforts that they can highlight as best practice. Intensive tutoring is one, extended learning time is another, really fostering those parent-teacher, parent-school relationships is a third. But at this point, from the state policy perspective, it's really fostering a lot of district flexibility and trying to offer that support around those different
I appreciate you, Dr. Arrington, and Ben, for struggling with that answer, because I want our audience to understand that we must struggle together in this answer. As Reverend Stafford indicated in regards to the P16 support in Jackson Public Schools, their work is focusing on understanding what the issues are inside of Jackson Public Schools, as Reverend Stafford identified, but also figuring out a way to truly support the district in implementing that. And there are no silver bullets in this process. One of our audience members posed a question in regards to if this pandemic was possibly a wake-up call for us during this pandemic. Could this pandemic be a wake-up call for us? What do you think? Anyone, 60 seconds.
I'll start on that. You all remember when parents used to say to their children, "Get off that computer and get your work done." Now they're saying, "Get on that computer and get your work done."
Exactly.
So there's been a total shift in the thinking and the paradigms, and I like what Dr. Moore said. We are now in the 20th century, and yet we're still using we're in the 21st century, still using 19th century models in many educational systems. And so we have got to get to the place, and parents have seen this, and educators have seen this before the parents saw it, that their children are in a place where they know how to utilize the technology for the wrong things most of the time. Now it's trying to train them to use the technology for the right reasons and the right ways to get to the right results that we're trying to get to. And I think that's part of what all of our community stakeholders, all of our partners and our schools have to be, cognizant of and pushing towards for my local districts on through the process. So I have tremendous hope that this COVID-19, we will be able to get the vaccines and the different things, and be able to have safe environments for our students to ultimately return. I don't quite think we're there yet. I applaud those who are pushing the envelope and trying to have hybrid models and trying to have sports and all of those things. And we keep seeing different results there. So we're seeing it all over the place, openings and closings and transitions and openings and closings. But ultimately, the vaccines and the knowledge and the technology will be available, because it's the technology that put us in a position to go from having a vaccine created every 10 to 20 years to being able to create a vaccine within a year. So that technology piece and that COVID-19 has pushed us to the place where we're supposed to have been 20 to 30, 40 years ago.
Thank you, Reverend Stafford. One of our other audience members posed a question around year-round schools. Does anyone have a thought about year-round school? I'm gonna have to give you 30 seconds on this. I'll take one response on that one.
Well, I want to say, and I'm going to piggyback on Reverend Stafford when he was talking about how the importance of the teacher in the room or educators has been underrated. And of course, with the pandemic, the importance now has been brought to light. And I'm saying that to say that earlier this week, the legislature actually held a session where they were talking about year-round schools. And at the beginning of the pandemic, okay, I would say maybe around April or May, every time we would hear, I would listen to the governor's report every day, and I know I'm past 30 seconds.
That's okay.
To talk about, how, virtual learning, right, being brought to the fore, and almost as if this was a salvation for us, and for our state and our kids who may have not been able to have access to a certified teacher, like in districts like mine. But now what we've seen is almost a 360-degree turn, because of course, when you look at all the technological issues, lack of access to Wi-Fi, all of those disparities, inequities, right, that exist with children of color and communities of color and poverty. So now we've moved to virtual learning maybe not being the silver bullet. And you know what? We better try and double down on education and teachers, and how do we keep kids in school and continuously and provide them with the extra support that they need. And the year-round schooling actually may be a way to do that, right? And also kind of alleviate some of those with the summer slides. And again, if we have another outbreak where we have to shut schools down again and have another instance of COVID slide. So I think we've come full circle with that. I'm actually really interested in the year-round school model, and we're actually meeting in my district now, trying to plan hours. I think Gulfport School District actually is on it this year, or planning to do it next year, and we're actually going to try and follow suit.
Okay. And I think, thank you, Dr. Arrington. And Dan, I believe you can, at some point, can you share some information with us later, in written information on year-round schools? Would that be okay?
Yes, absolutely.
Awesome, awesome. We've actually completed our 1 hour. Dr. Moore, Mr. Irwin, Reverend Stafford, Dr. Arrington, I really appreciate each of you for your time this morning. And I want to thank the audience for taking the time to be with us to talk about learning loss amid COVID-19. I encourage everyone to go back to your local communities and have this conversation. And I want to follow up, just refer to the question from the audience member about whether this was a wake-up call. I don't necessarily think it's a wake-up call, but I think it is a reminder that if we don't work together as a community, it will only get worse, not better. There won't be, as we support full funding of education, but without full funding, but if we don't ensure that we're getting the best teachers in the classroom, full funding, and we need funding to get the best teachers. We need to make sure that we also get more resources inside the classroom, better facilities for our kids. But with all of those things, if we don't have the hearts and minds of community folk, parents, community leaders, the pastors, the city leaders, if we're not all of one mind in our local communities, it doesn't matter how many laptops we put out there, how many hotspots we put out there. It doesn't matter how much training we give teachers. If we don't ensure that everyone is making sure that our kids are where they need to be, for getting the support that they need from their parents, and everyone showing up for children. Everyone must show up for children. There is no one thing that's going to pull the trigger on solving this issue. It is a confluence of things that must work together. And I really appreciate everyone who brought your perspectives to the panel today. And thank you, audience, for taking the time to be with us. This concludes our panel for today. We're actually 2 minutes and 32 seconds over. So everyone have a great Saturday. We hope we have this opportunity again to talk about education of children in Mississippi. Have a great Saturday.